help take your concerns to the NACD board, and yeah, I mean, I'm available, so feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Josh. And if you don't have his contact information and you want to get a hold of him, that's also on our NACD website on the Southwest page, as well as our chair and vice chair's information. And you can also, of course, reach out to me if you have any questions or want to get a hold of anybody. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Zach Byram. He's he's in Buffalo, Wyoming, with the Clear Creek Conservation District, and he's going to tell us about some really cool projects they've got going on.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that. First of all, I want to apologize for my froggy voice. I've been a little bit under the weather the last few days, and I just finished my second round of chugging Theraflu today. So if I start acting a little bit funny, that would be why. So I think the approach today is going to be, it might be a little bit different than some of the others in the past. I'm actually going to present two different projects that we're currently working on. Each presentation is going to be relatively short. So if we could maybe wait for questions until the end of each presentation, then I'd be happy to answer those questions. The first one that we're going to go through is our Russian olive removal program. It's a cost share program. After that one, we'll dive into a project that I'm really excited about. And that's a web-based watershed model that we're having created for us. So I think what I'm going to try to do, this is my first experience with this also, but I'm going to go ahead and start sharing these presentations, and I'll just walk through each one. My style is lots of pictures and colors and very few words, just like the books that I like to read. So we'll try to get started here. Okay, everybody see okay?
Looks good. We still have that sidebar on. There we go. That looks great.
Okay. All right. So the first one we're going to go over is our Russian olive treatment cost share program. It's really more about invasive weed management and restoration. You know, a lot of times when we think about invasive weed management, we currently are thinking a lot about annual invasive grasses. You know, we have an incredible amount of cheatgrass. Wyoming now is dealing with ventonata as well as Medusa head. So a lot of times when we're thinking invasive weed management, I think that's where people's heads go. People that know me also know that Russian olive is high on my hit list in terms of invasive weeds. So with this project, what I'm going to go through is kind of what our project goals were. Sorry, I got to move the screen out of the way. Why remove Russian olive? How? So that's project implementation. Kind of what is it? So what did our cost share program look like? And the same thing that most, if not all, conservation districts struggle with or are deeply involved with is the funding. Who do we get funding for these projects? So our first project goal, easy and obvious, is remove Russian olive from our priority project areas. We will get to how we kind of designated our priority project areas in just a minute. The second goal, when I'm thinking about any type of invasive weed management, I also try to like to think about what's the next step. And in my mind, that next step is rehab or restoration. So that was our second project goal, was to replant native beneficial trees and shrubs into the areas where we have removed the Russian olive. The third project goal is, my background is fairly heavy on science, so I'm still kind of nerdy about monitoring. And so our third project goal is to monitor and address any regrowth of Russian olive and other potential invasive weeds. One of the issues with doing Russian olive removal, especially in larger monotypic stands, is that you can oftentimes have a flush of other invasives that have just been hiding in the shade, so to speak. Houndstong and thistle are two of the big ones that we deal with. Okay, so why Russian olive removal? Before I get into why we were interested in it, I'd like to address the 800-pound gorilla in the room and say that I do understand that there's a double-edged sword with Russian olive. You know, a lot of our agricultural producers around here like to have some Russian olive because it does create a windbreak for their livestock. Other people will argue also, and there's merit to it, that Russian olive can be good for wildlife, and that's fair to say to a certain extent. Once you get large monotypic stands, your diversity and wildlife habitat will actually start to decrease. But with that said, these are the reasons that my board and I thought that it would be important to go after Russian olive in our district. We wanted to do it to try to increase or to decrease, because Russian olive will increase irrigation, ditch maintenance, and costs. Russian olive will decrease water source to field efficiency. It can decrease the amount of diversity of wildlife once monotypic stands are established. It can decrease livestock grazing capacity if left unchecked. And another big reason for us is because Wyoming did declare Russian olive as a noxious weed back in 2007. The pictures on the left are both taken in Clear Creek Conservation District boundaries. The one on the top obviously is an infestation of Russian olive along one of our water bodies. The lower picture is looking east to west towards the Bighorn Mountains along Clear Creek drainage. And that's a really, really vibrant cottonwood gallery right there. We have a trail system that goes through there, no Russian olive. And so that's kind of what we're aiming for in the future as we continue this program. Okay, project implementation. So like a lot of us deal with when we're looking at projects, it often is a huge project idea. And so how do you get it to a point where it's not only feasible, but actually, or also from an administrative standpoint, how is it something that you can actually boil down to meet your project goals? So what we did is we prioritized the main water bodies around the city of Buffalo. And then, so those main water bodies are Clear Creek, Rock Creek, and French Creek. And then to ensure that we were capturing some of the tributaries that go into those main stems, I added a 1/4 mile buffer in, again, to try to increase the distance from those main stems that we would be prioritizing to treat. We also focused on and contacted ditch companies and irrigation districts. We only have one irrigation district. The rest are kind of loosely stitched together ditch companies, but we also wanted to focus on those irrigation ditches that we have within our district boundaries. So you can see on the map, everything within the red is kind of how we decided to take the first step and prioritize those areas. The reason I prioritize the main stems is we were starting to see Russian olive creep kind of from the town of Buffalo, which is your polygon with that blue hash there. We were starting to see Russian olive creep kind of south to northeast there along Clear Creek, which is our main water body. And so we felt that that was definitely where and how we wanted to prioritize this project. And then we added Rock Creek and French Creek, and then some stuff as we head south of town as well. But that's kind of how we decided to boil it down and make it a little bit more approachable and feasible. So to be honest, this is kind of a filler slide, but I wanted everybody to see one of the things that all of the landowners within those priority areas received. we put together a letter kind of detailing the cost share program. And then we also sent this pamphlet as well that's kind of boils everything down into the who, what, why, and where of the project as well. Once the landowners had an opportunity to receive the letter and the pamphlet and spend some time with it sitting on their kitchen counter, we did also make a handful of cold calls as well, just to do a little bit extra marketing and seeing where people's palatability was with the project. So we sent out 150 letters and pamphlets kind of randomly through the landowners that were within those priority areas. And we actually received, well, within the project, we ended up with 25 different landowners. I don't know if that's good or bad in terms of statistics. I mean, I know what the numbers are, but I think for our area, it was actually pretty good. So along with how we prioritized it, I wanted to put a slide in here also of just really simple how we went about contracting it. We've all done it before, but we wrote an RFP. Once we had some interest, we hosted a mandatory pre-bid site visit. The reason I made it mandatory is anybody that's ever worked with Russian olive before knows that every site is going to be different from the next, whether it's because of terrain or the density of the stand or the age of the trees. So are they younger? Are they older and bigger? Is there quite a bit of water involved? You know, there's a lot of moving parts within each one of these sites. And so I wanted the contractors to be sure that they were able to see every site that landowners had shown some interest in. That way they could bid it more accurately because of all those different moving parts. I didn't want a contractor to come back and say, well, you know, this site was way more difficult because there was a pond with cattails, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're going to need to charge more for this one. That's what I wanted to avoid. Also within the RFP, I asked that they come with a bid price for two different options. Option A, as you can see there, would be just to cut and do a stump treatment of the trees. So basically that means they would just deal with the trees and leave them on the ground or leave them in piles for the landowner to either come back and burn later, or a lot of our agricultural producers will actually use those and stack them up as a windbreak for their livestock. Option B was to cut, do the stump treatment, and then remove the trees from the property. That obviously costs a little bit more because you're mobilizing dump trucks, etc. And that really was something that more of the smaller landowners wanted to do because they didn't have livestock to use those trees for a windbreak, and or they didn't want to come back and burn them. So two different options that landowners could choose to do when we were working with them. And you can see here, those are the winning bids. So for option A, $2,700 per acre to do a cut and stump treatment, or $3,700 to cut, stump treatment, and remove. We had several bids, and we had a huge diversity of pricing within those bids, but those are the winning bids right there. Same contractor. So this is the cool part to me. One of the issues that I was having was coming up with an accurate estimate of acreage for each individual landowner that wanted to participate, because we asked the contractors to bid on a per acre cost. You know, I can sit there on GIS and try to digitize everything, but you know, there's different years of aerial data, etc. And so to try to avoid any of that and get the most up-to-date aerial footage we could, we used a couple different drones to fly each one of the project areas. And then, so we stitched all of the photos together and then sat down and digitized the acreages from there. What that did was gave us the most up-to-date and the most accurate data that we possibly could get in terms of timing for the aerial views. The one issue that we had, and it's something that we will do differently in the future, we flew a lot of this stuff kind of later in the fall, where leaves were starting to change, and in some of the areas it was hard to decipher whether it was Russian olive or another deciduous type tree. If we were to do it a little bit earlier, early fall or even late summer, I think we would be able to be even more accurate. Although this approach was really accurate, especially once we started comparing contractors' notes with our digitized features. We were usually within less than a quarter acre. It was usually about 1/10 of an acre difference between what we digitized and what the contractors did the work on the ground. And that difference mostly came from, there's, you know, younger Russian olive, you know, 2- and 3-year-old trees, you can't really see unless you're on the ground, or if they're under some older, more mature trees, or say within a cottonwood gallery that we just couldn't see. But that was a really good approach, and it's something that we're going to continue to do. I think each time we do this, we're just going to get better and better at it. But using the drone saved us a lot of time, and I think in the long run saved a lot of avoiding discrepancies between what the landowner was expecting his cost to be and what his actual cost was. So what was our cost share program and how did we run it? So the cost share program was approached as a 2-phase program. What I mean by that is we had phase 1, which was the actual get in and get dirty with whether it was chainsaws or mini excavators or mulchers or whatever the contractor wanted to use. We'd get in, do the removal and the stump treatment. So removal, stump treatment, or removal, stump treatment, and then taking all the trees off the property. That was a 70-30 cost share program. So the Clear Creek Conservation District paid 70% of that, and the landowner paid 30%. So that was the same whether or not, so it was 70-30 whether or not the landowner chose that option A or option B that we talked about earlier. Phase 2 was our restoration portion. And so that was what I had mentioned earlier. What's really important to me in these invasive weed management projects is to come back in and do our best to restore either through plantings or reseedings. But in this particular project, our phase 2 is restoration. And so that is assisting the landowners plant native trees and shrubs back into the areas where we did the Russian olive removal. And to really try to make it more palatable for the landowners, we chose to do a 50-50 cost share. So the district is paying 50% and the landowners paying 50%. But there's also more to it than that. So we have at Clear Creek Conservation District an annual tree program where we order in conservation grade trees for our constituents, and we pay shipping and handling on all of those trees. So the landowner for the restoration is paying 50% of the tree cost, but in fact it's probably only about 25% of the actual cost that they're paying for, since they're ordering those trees through our tree program that we're already paying shipping and handling on. So we're pretty excited about that. One thing that we are going to try to do in the future with this program is look at hiring restoration type companies that would come in and do mass plantings rather than have, sell a landowner 5 or 6 smaller cottonwood trees and some buffalo berry, we'd like to contract with a group that would go in and do mass plantings of buffalo berry along stream banks, or cottonwoods back into existing cottonwood galleries. That would save the landowner time, and by throwing more trees and shrubs at it, we would hope that we would have a little bit better survival in terms of numbers of trees that are successful, because we don't expect landowners to go out and plant 100 American plum and keep them watered all of the time. That's pretty high expectation, but that is phase 2 of the project, and it is something that we're going to focus on looking at a little bit differently in the future. So funding, obviously that's a big part in any and all of the projects that we as conservation districts do. For those of you not in Wyoming and not familiar with this group, we've got a wonderful group in Wyoming that's funded through the Wyoming legislature. It's called the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust. They're an excellent group that is very supportive of specifically on the ground projects, ranging from invasive weed management to fish barrier removal and replacement. It's a really great group that reaches out, and it every year says that conservation districts don't apply for enough money from them. So that's always good to hear. The other group that helped us out was the Johnson County Commissioners. That's the county that there's 2 conservation districts in Johnson County. Clear Creek Conservation District is in the northern half. Powder River Conservation District is in the southern half, and our commissioners are becoming more and more involved with our natural resources, and so they're a big help in this project as well. Our Johnson County Weed and Pest group, they are an in-kind donor. They're going to go back out this summer and the following summer and do any respraying if necessary. So any of the stumps that were cut, if any of them, they were all treated, but if for some reason there's a need to respray, the Weed and Pest is going to go do that for us. And then of course the district, we put in money, planning, technical services, and administration. So not a lot of people involved, which for me and our bookkeeper and education coordinator standpoint, it's a lot easier to deal with just a handful of funding partners than a lot of funding partners. Obviously, we'll do it both ways, but this was nice just to deal with a handful on this particular project. So to date, we have 25 landowners that have been enrolled, and we've removed almost 45 acres of Russian olive from our priority areas. Currently, the total project cost is, well, you can see it there, just a skosh over 122,000. And then you can see what the landowner contributions have been, and you can see what the partner contributions have been. In terms of the phase 2 restoration plantings, our annual tree program is open and we're taking orders right now. We'll stop taking orders here in about 3 weeks. And so these landowners that have been involved still have time to order. And we have had some that have come in and ordered trees. In fact, I'm meeting with one later this afternoon that wants me to come walk through their property with them, and we'll go over what type and kind of how many trees we think we need to get for them. So that top, I'm really excited about this particular spot. So you can see that top picture versus the bottom picture. That was a significant monotypic stand right there. We already have plans to replant buffalo berry and American chokecherry or back in there. You can kind of see too, if you look real close on the right hand side of that road, there's a small number of sheep that the landowner has turned out already. So you can see there's a significant difference in impact that makes. So that kind of ends my Russian olive removal program. I'd be happy to entertain any questions on that.
And feel free to just come off mute, or if you'd rather put it in the chat, I can read that out as well.
Hey, Zach, can you hear me? This is Carmen.
Hey, Carmen, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for doing this with us this morning. Just a quick question with the treatment side. Do you, one of the things that we've been looking at as we're talking about this as well is how many years of spray treatment we're talking about, asking the landowners to consider after the initial treatment. Is that a part of what you're doing with the landowners too? Like say a 3-year treatment or?
Yeah, so that 3-year mark is a good one. It's a good benchmark. I guess I would start with saying that from my experience with some other projects that we've done. So you saw in that in the presentation that the first year is going to be on us, and then we're asking the landowners to then take it upon themselves for an additional 2 years. Here in Johnson County, though, the Johnson County Weed and Pest works with landowners and cost shares the different types of herbicides that are used for stump treatment. So it's really inexpensive for the landowner. Most of the landowners within these projects were, I would say, an average of an acre to an acre and a half. So not a lot of country for them to have to go cover on their own. Our hope is that with the contractor and weed and pest following up this summer, that the landowners really won't have a whole lot to do, but they are being asked to do for another 2 summers after.
Okay,
Did that answer your question, Carmen?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Are you asking them to sign an agreement saying that they'll do it?
Yeah, so that's something I didn't include in here. We do have a contract that we have the landowner sign. So, but we're really just asking them to be a good human and do what they say they will. We don't have any teeth necessarily with those contracts. Like, we're not going to go out and ask them to repay us or anything like that. It's just something that we're asking them to do. Again, we don't really have any legal binding to keep them to that, but most people, if they're involved enough to put money into the project and understand the importance of it, we in the past haven't had any issues with people not following up on that.
It looks like Kristen has a question.
Yes, I have 2 questions. One, if you could say the reason behind the decision to do a area-wide RFP versus each specific landowner, like, because you said the cat pond with a cattail would be more expensive. So, why share that cost with all the landowners? And 2, how you got the county commissioners to contribute, the process there.
Okay, yeah. So to answer your first question, and maybe I didn't explain it well enough, but I wanted the contractors to visit all of the potential locations up to that point in terms of the landowners that had already said they wanted to be involved. And so to do a blanket per acre cost is just a lot easier than trying to get a contractor. So we had a contractor and a subcontractor. We had one guy that was removing the trees, and then another guy, two groups. One group would remove the trees, another group would do the stump treatment. So to just ask them to do a per acre cost as a kind of a blanket cost was easier to do than to have them bid a different cost for 25 different landowners. It really shakes out in the long run, because the smaller areas ones, like the landowners that had, maybe a half acre to an acre, they were easily accessible. The trees were all close to a road. And so although they were paying the same per acre, the time that it took and the smaller acreage made it like a fair or less cost than the larger acre producers. I don't know if that answers your question, but it would just made it easier than dealing with 25 different costs for 25 different landowners on a per acre cost. And then to answer the second question, our county commissioners are really involved with all of the special districts in the county. So each one of them is tasked with being a liaison between special district boards and the commissioners themselves. So the county commissioner that attends our board meetings and is our liaison between the other commissioners and our board, since he's at all of our meetings, he heard us talking about the project and asked if they could help. And of course I said yes. And that's kind of how that came about. So we are lucky in Johnson County to have a group of commissioners that are really involved with all of the special districts.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions about the Russian olive project?
I have a question. Hi, Zach. This is Kathy Rosenthal.
Hi, Kathy Rosenthal. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. And I'm sorry if I missed this at the beginning, but how did the conversation start with your weed and pest? Was it after the county commissioners you guys started that conversation and then went to them? Did they come to you? I guess, how did that really springboard for you guys?
Yeah, so this is something that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. And so I had previous conversations with the weed and pest, and we'd kick around ideas and then it would get put on the back burner, and summer would come up and we were all too busy, and it's all those things that we all deal with. So it wasn't a new conversation. It was one that we finally just sat down and said, all right, we want to do this. How does that look? When do we want to do it? Why do we want to do it? And so it was conversations that I sat down with weed and pest specifically for, but we had talked about it on occasion previous to actually getting it cemented in.
Perfect. Thank you, Zach.
You're welcome, Kathy Rosenthal.
I'm just about to start a Russian olive project, and we're actually selecting our contractor this evening at a board meeting. And would it be okay if I reached out to you when I have questions along the way?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the great things about these sharing sessions, and Rachel alluded to it earlier, is we're all really kind of in the same trenches working on the same type of projects. And so if there's not a need to reinvent the wheel, I'm more than happy to help out.
Thank you. How can we get your contact information?
My guess is that Rachel can probably get it out after the meeting.
If you're okay, when I send out the email blast with the recording, if you're okay with me just including your email, that might be the easiest way.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And good luck with the selection process.
Thank you.
Should we move on to the next presentation, or is there maybe one or two other questions on the Russian olive?
I think we
No?
can move on to the watershed project.
Okay. Now let me see here. Okay, I think I got to share my screen again. All right. How's that look?
Looks good.
Okay. All right. So round number 2. So we are currently working on a watershed model for the Clear Creek watershed. The Clear Creek watershed, and I'll get to this in a few more slides, but just for some 30,000 foot view, Clear Creek watershed is the watershed that the municipality of Buffalo and Claremont, Wyoming are in. It's also the watershed that the majority of recreation takes place in. It's also the watershed where the majority of our irrigation comes from. And so it's a really important watershed within our district. And so that's, we'll get into more detail in terms of why we wanted to develop this this watershed model. We're also looking at it as a web-based water management decision support tool. I'm not going to come up with an acronym for that because I think there's plenty of acronyms running around out there already. But that's kind of the 30,000 foot view for this project in this presentation. So as I had mentioned, Clear Creek watershed is a really important watershed within our district. It does spill over into Sheridan County, which is a county north of us. But within the entirety, the watershed has over 1,200 miles of streams, of which, and 40,000 acres of land is irrigated within the Clear Creek watershed. And as I mentioned a little bit ago too, the Clear Creek watershed is where Buffalo and Claremont, Wyoming get all of our municipal water supply from. So this screen shows the entire Clear Creek watershed. These next slides show just the watershed that are within Johnson County. And so you can see we've got almost 440,000 acres within the Clear Creek watershed that are in Johnson County. That little pink mass there is the municipality of Buffalo. I didn't put Claremont on there because it's too small to show up anyway. Oops. We have 755 stream miles within the Johnson County portion of Clear Creek watershed, 45 miles of which is Clear Creek. So Clear Creek is the one that we were also focusing our Russian olive removal prioritization in. And that's the one from the town of Buffalo, kind of goes north to, from the south, it moves northeast up into Sheridan County. But it's one of the most important stream systems within the watershed. And it's really the stream that kind of has prompted or has been the impetus for this hydrology or the watershed model development. So within the Clear Creek watershed, we have 32 major irrigation ditches. 16 of those ditches come directly from Clear Creek, and 62, so that's about 62 miles of ditch, most of which is open earth line ditches. So no piping, no, not even any old concrete. It's just in 1885 when the ditches were built. Those are the same ditches that we have for the most part. This slide is kind of showing, again, it's just kind of giving everybody an overview of the watershed within our district. We irrigate just under 10,000 acres directly from Clear Creek itself. There's about 26,000 acres that are irrigated within the watershed, but almost 10,000 of those come directly from the single Clear Creek that I keep talking about. just kind of a fun slide with pictures, not very many words, which are my favorite, but it shows a little bit of everything. It shows the streams, it shows where the irrigated lands are, and it shows where those irrigation ditches are. Obviously, the irrigated lands and the ditches are all tied together, but you can see there's two kind of main spots, one right around the town of Buffalo, and then just north and west a tiny bit. There's also, you know, we have a lot of ditches and irrigation there as well. That's on the Rock Creek drainage. Okay, so why develop a watershed model? So through the years, Clear Creek Conservation District, it used to be, and some of you that are on today know this, and you know the long story behind it. We used to be called Lake DeSmet Conservation District. One of the first things I did when I was hired as a district manager is went through the process of changing our name. If you want to ask me later why we did that, you're welcome to, but for now, we'll just suffice it to say it was easier to be called Clear Creek Conservation District than Lake DeSmet Conservation District. So anyway, why develop this model? So we've had several different studies, several different comprehensive studies completed through the years. One was done in 2007 that really just identified resource concerns. And then we used that information to then have a level 1 study conducted in 2011, which assessed, described, and inventoried Clear Creek watershed. So a little more detail about that. What we got from that level 1 study was a characterization of irrigation ditches, which basically was like, this one's really bad, this one's bad, and this one's not as bad, but they're all bad. It's just what level of degradation are they all in? So then it took each irrigation ditch, looked at the structures and evaluated them, and then provided cost estimates for either remediation of those issues or complete replacement for those issues. And you can see even in 2011 dollars, that's pretty staggering when you look at that and say, oh, well, we know there's a problem, but we don't have $11 million to address all of it. We don't have $5 million to address the issues that specifically are affecting Clear Creek. And those are 2011 numbers. So we can assume probably fairly easily that those numbers are probably close to double at this point. So those are kind of two of the larger studies that we've had done. Other reasons to look at doing a watershed hydrology model is, and I know we all face this, especially in this Southwest region where water is of the utmost importance to everybody. Clear Creek, like many other bodies of water, is way over adjudicated. So we've got too many straws in the bottle, not enough liquid in that bottle to go around. Those are all issues related to Wyoming water law, which won't ever change most likely. But without diving into Wyoming water law, Clear Creek, at least through portions of town, nearly dries up each year between August 15th and October 15th. There's obviously issues related to that in terms of fisheries. The low water increases water temperatures, which affect trout and invertebrates survivability. That's also the time of year when brown trout start to move up to their spawning beds. And with each year, we're having a decrease in brown trout numbers. There's obviously a number of variables involved with that, but low water and high temperatures certainly don't help. We're also facing, as well as many other places within our Southwest region, municipal growth, whether that's industrial or more and more homeowners moving in and building. So Clear Creek specifically is facing additional strain through increased industrial use and new homeowner use as well. So we oh, there we go. We have some of the pieces in the puzzle that we need to help prioritize where and how to start approaching these problems. You know, we knew what the soil type was. We know the number of users on the ditches. We know that we're losing water. We don't know how much. We know the number of acres that are being irrigated and what that production is. We have an idea of what the cost is, but we're up until, well, we still don't know completely, but how do you find that sweet spot right in the middle? So we know the different pieces of the puzzle. We needed a little bit more information before we start trying to prioritize areas to work in, right? So similar to a lot of projects that we work with, it's a big elephant. Where do you start eating, right? So this concept of building a watershed model is to help us get a better handle on the hydrologic processes that are happening, how that affects water use, where most of our losses are, and hopefully that will help us prioritize. So for instance, as an example, we have a lot of sandy soils. And so obviously we know we're losing water through our soils, but is it more cost effective to put pipe in some of these? Or if we put pipe in some of these, are we actually stopping water from flowing back into Clear Creek further downstream? Those are some of the answers that we wanted to make. And we also don't want to do small, ineffective Band-Aid fixes. If we're going to delve into these issues, we want to know that the money and the time that we're going to be spending, because it's going to be big on both sides, lots of money, lots of time. We want to make sure that the ditches that we're prioritizing and the work that we're prioritizing, that we're getting the most bang for our buck out of, and we're not affecting anything that we didn't think about, if that makes sense. So not hindering water flowing back into Clear Creek somewhere else or any of the other water bodies. So we've contracted with a PhD candidate from the University of Wyoming who is building this model for us. I didn't see anybody from Paposia Conservation District on, but Paposia Conservation District in Lander, Wyoming is working and has worked with this same candidate student who I think their model is pretty much close to completed. Anyway, we've contracted with this student to assist with data investigation. So the watershed model should help us, should provide hydrologic analysis of the watershed, where we're going to be able to run different scenarios for irrigation efficiency changes, so conveyance and on-farm infrastructure. So the model is going to help us. So I can pick a ditch and say, okay, what's the water loss in this ditch currently? And then what is the water loss in this ditch if we put pipe in it? What's the water loss in this ditch if they just put cement structure in it? What is the water loss if, fill in the blank? And then what does that efficiency look like when we get to the farm? How much additional water are they going to be receiving? And so by modeling these conveyance losses and inefficiencies, that's how we're going to hopefully start to whittle down where to start looking at where to prioritize our work at. There's a lot of other fun things that it's going to be able to do, but overall, that's what my personal highest interest is having it model where our conveyance losses are the greatest and where those inefficiencies can be dealt with to have the greatest benefit. So our model is currently 60% complete-ish. I recently visited with the PhD candidate, and things are going to slow down a little bit as he needs to get a couple more chapters of his dissertation put together. But we're currently about 60% complete. And to date, some of the data that can be generated, and it's really, you know, more just fun colors and than being able to run any conveyance issues currently. That's where the next 40% is going to come from. But we currently have kind of a heat map that shows where the majority of the appropriations, the water appropriations, are coming from. So your darker red colors is where there's a higher amount of appropriated water versus your cooler colors, your blues and your greens. We also have a heat map that's showing where our gains and losses currently are within the watershed. Again, the warmer colors are showing the higher amounts of loss versus gain. You can see specifically around, well, I know where Buffalo is in this picture, but it's really where there's a lot of irrigation ditches, a lot of irrigation happening. We have a lot of reds, we have a lot of oranges. So obviously that's where the largest amount of our loss is. The blues are where we're gaining. That's in general around Buffalo. As we move into those cooler colors, that's further down Clear Creek where there's still irrigation, but the majority of the water that's used for irrigation comes from above Buffalo itself. So that's why we see a lot of the red colors above the municipality of Buffalo. This is also just a general overall how much water is being lost and where the majority of it is being lost from. Currently, the model is showing that of the appropriated water within the Clear Creek watershed, 18% of that is lost. Now, where is it lost? Most of it's probably lost through seepage. Obviously, there's still going to be evaporation and transevaporation, but the majority of it is going to be through the open ditches, the earthen ditches, where it's just going to be seepage issues. We also currently have been able to model some of the conveyance efficiencies. So it's not all of the irrigation ditches, but there's a number of them, and it's showing how efficient each one of them is. The Prairie Dog Water Supply Company ditch that you see that's 90% efficient, that is one of the ditches that has had work done on it, where it's either the majority of it has now been piped. Then you go all the way down to the bottom. This Penrose ditch is 31% efficient in terms of its conveyance. So you can see that there's a lot of inefficiencies within just these ditches that are in this table. There's another 16 or 17 ditches that aren't in this table that have similar, if not worse, conveyance efficiencies. One can assume that by increasing, or one can assume that by even just piping these ditches or even piping portions of these ditches, that your conveyance efficiencies are going to increase. This slide is kind of showing the flow of the model development, I guess you could say. As I had mentioned earlier, we're about 60% done with the development of the model. The green checks are what's been completed. Obviously, anything that's blank is still stuff that needs to be done. So the next 40%-ish of this model is really going to be the meat and potatoes of it. It's going to be the portion where we're going to be able to glean or extract the answers that we're looking for before we move forward with looking for funding to do larger projects. One thing that's going to help fill out the remainder of the development is going to be having seepage studies conducted within the modeled area. So That's something I'm currently working on, is putting some RFPs together to have a couple different seepage studies done on a number of the ditches that the PhD candidate feels would be the best ones to utilize when putting it back into the model, to kind of finalizing the model and then making it more robust. So before I take any questions, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but the model is web-based, so I'm going to try to access that and share what we currently have on that model. I'll just kind of, if it does come up, I'll just kind of scroll through some of what we can do with it. And then I can answer any questions. So let me see if I can do this. So Rachel, I think I probably have to stop sharing this screen and then open a new one, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
And Zach, is this a shareable link, since we are getting close to time, in case people want to go back and look at it more detailed, or is this just an internal thing right now?
Currently it's only internal.
Okay.
So we can skip that and I can answer questions, or
I think if you want to pull that up quickly, we can just take questions while you're pulling that up. That might be work well. Does anybody have any questions about the watershed project? One question I had is the funding for this model. So since it is a grad student, do you enter into a contract with him, or how does that work as far as getting that funded?
Sorry, just a second.
Sorry, I'm asking you to.
Okay, no, you're good. So to answer your question, we contract through the University of Wyoming. And so we pay the university, and the university then pays the student, if that makes sense. And so to maybe go into the funding a little bit more, we as the district, Clear Creek Conservation District, is the only one currently involved with any of the funding. So we didn't get any grant funding to help pay for this model. A lot of that is because I often will put the cart in front of the horse, and I just jumped on it when I had the chance. And we're fortunate to have some funds to be able to do projects like this without having to go through a grant process. Any work that we do will obviously have to be, we'll have to involve more funding partners for any of the actual project work that we'd like to glean out of this. So can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So currently I have it this is the watershed, obviously. From what I've currently queried right here, which is, I'm just going to leave it as all, but I can query by different HUC sources, by stream sources, by diversion ID. And then with those queries, I can come through and I can choose any of these smaller HUCs, or I can zoom in and choose a specific diversion. I can choose a specific ditch. I can choose a specific area that's irrigated. I can either do that on the map, or I can do that in the drop down. I can also do the same thing here. I can also, if I choose stream up here, it will only show all the different streams, which I can then query different questions for below. But here's just an example of some of the data that's available through the queries. I know it looks like a lot, and it kind of is. It's something I'm still wading through and figuring out. But one thing I want to show everybody, and then I'll stop talking and answer questions. But this blank spot right here, the estimated conveyance loss, that is what we really want answers for. Because that that is what we're after, is increasing efficiencies and trying to help keep more water available for additional uses. Sorry I talked too long. I would have liked to spend more time kind of scrolling through this, but you get an idea of all the information that we now have access to right at my fingertips. So I'm hopeful that having this kind of information also when we are applying for grants will be able to help us have more concise numbers when we're talking about water loss, etc. when I'm applying for grant funding. So I'd be happy to take any questions on either this project, or if people had other Russian olive ideas pop into their head. Sorry again for talking more than I should have.
No, this was great. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, hi Zach. I have a question. So you said that you're contracting through the university. Does the university also provide some kind of like quality feedback on the work just to make sure it's accurate and valid what you're getting from your PhD candidate?
Yeah, I think so. You know, in part of this development, it's also something that you know, I don't know what they call him, his board that he has to present to. You know, he and several of his professors are working on these models together, and so there is some QA QC built into it. That is kind of something though that we're maybe rolling the dice on a little bit in the early stages, is because we all know that with models, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out. Like what you put into it is what you're getting out of it. So there is maybe a tiny bit of skepticism early on, but the more information that is put into that model, the more robust it becomes. And the professors that he's working with are also part of the project. I just didn't say that they're involved because he's the one that's doing the majority of the groundwork, but they're involved with the QA QC of the model itself.
Very good. And do you know or do you care to share kind of what that cost is?
Yeah, so I'm happy to tell you, because he's a PhD student and he's not doing this as a third-party consultant yet, we're gonna be into this model for about 20,000 by the time it's all said and done. When he graduates, this is what he's going to do for a living. It's going to be way more expensive. And with that said, also with this model and the contract that we have signed with him, we're going to be able to, any additional information that we get from other studies, etc., can be plugged into this at any point in time. That makes it just that much more robust. Or if a water right changes or something like that happens, it can easily just be dropped into the model. And so it should always be able to be up to date and accurate. And that's part of what he's been contracted to do, is to, you know, we always have access to improvements within the model.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I have one or two, if that's okay, Rachel.
Yeah, go for it, Carmen.
Okay, thank you. Zach, how many irrigation districts were involved in this study, or how many are covered here?
So we only have one actual irrigation district within Clear Creek Conservation District boundaries. We have several ditch companies. There's a couple that we've worked with on this, you know, whether it was for access for some on the ground work, or speaking with them to see if we could use their ditch for seepage studies. Currently, everything that's been put into here is all publicly available data through, whether it's the SEO website or through you know, DEQ information or Wyoming water development information. It's all publicly accessible data. It's just been scrubbed and all put together in one spot.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thought you said you had 2 questions, Carmen.
Yeah, I did. The other one was, and I think you probably already covered this, but just clarifying, so the bulk of this, of your foundation here came from what was captured in your level 1 versus other studies that may have been completed previously with water development.
Yeah, so that level 1 study is really what the impetus of this model is there's so much information in there that we know we're going to spend a lot of money and a lot of time. We just want to make sure, like, I'm happy to spend a little bit more money and a little bit more time to have this model built in order to move into the future and pick the projects that are going to be the most beneficial for the watershed, the producer, the stream itself, right? Like, there's a 1,000 different projects we could do here, but I want to make sure we're choosing 3 that are going to have the most bang for their buck.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, and if you think of some, I did put Zach's email in the chat, and I'll also include it in the email with the recording. So I'm sure you could just email him directly if you think of something after we hop off. But I want to thank Zach for the great presentations. I think it was really informational and definitely applicable to what we have going on in our region for sure. Like I said, this was recorded, so we'll be able to share that recording in case you want to go back or somebody else wants to see it that wasn't able to make it live. And also, if you or your district has a project that you would like to share, feel free to reach out to me. I am gathering a list of districts that would like to be part of our future sharing sessions. So let me know on that. And even if it's just, you know, a challenge or something that you think other districts might be dealing with, it doesn't have to be, you know, the highlight of your district. It could be something that maybe isn't quite as polished that you want to share with everybody and get feedback on. So anyway, keep in mind that outreach session that we have on May 7th. And be on the lookout for the recording. I put the link for the email sign up in case you're not on my list. That's the list I'll use to send out the recording. And it'll also be on our NACD website on the Southwest page. And I just want to thank Zach again and thank everybody for coming. This was a great session. Thank you.
Can I ask Zach a quick question? I just didn't want to take time, but
yeah.
So in our meeting tonight where we're having to choose a contractor, we're basically trying to have to decide if a certain area of, if the project would be better to be done by like a tree company where they use chainsaws and grinders and such, and or if the project in that area would be better to be done by a masticator. Would it be possible for me to maybe send you our Russian olive mapping and for you to maybe look at it and maybe see if you have an opinion?
I'm sure I'll have an opinion. Yeah,
Okay.
you're welcome. You're welcome to do that. I'd be happy to help.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll try and get that to you in the next half an hour or so. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Appreciate it. I enjoyed it very much. It was lovely. Thank you.
Well, good. I'm glad. And thanks everybody for joining. And like Rachel said, my email is going to be available through the chat or an email blast. Happy to answer any questions that might pop up later, or you know, in a few months from now, just whenever, or however, I'd be happy to help. Thanks for your time.
All right. Well, thanks everybody and have a good rest of your day.